Yay!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic the Hedgehog reread series for fans of all shapes and sizes. As usual, I'm your host, Devin, joined today by my comrades, Lauren and Bruce. And today, we are recording the Tales miniseries of Archie Sonic comics, plus a couple other things.
Yes, indeed.
This miniseries was kind of underwhelming.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, after the Sally miniseries, I was like, that's about right.
Yeah.
I find it more interesting in some ways and less interesting in others.
I mean, seeing the Australian freedom fighters was kind of cool.
What about the underwater freedom fighters?
That was strange.
I agree.
I said last time that it was gonna be weird, and it certainly succeeded at being weird.
Well, I think it's really weird because, despite being the main character, Tails does not really feel like the main focus.
As I said, after the Sally miniseries, it's about what I expected.
Fair.
Yeah, so we're starting off here with Tails #1, and yeah, it's like the cover. Well, I mean, it's Spaziant, so it naturally looks pretty great, but it's like,
Yeah.
it puts Tails in focus, and he's orange, I might add, not brown.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it does the usual Spaziant thing of looking like it's a better comic than it is.
Still great art. What I don't like is the branding of Sonic the Hedgehog's buddy Tails.
Yeah.
Off-putting, in my opinion.
It really should just be Tails the Hedgehog, or Tails the Hedgehog, no, Tails the Fox or something.
No, Tails the Hedgehog.
Tails the Fox. Like, I get that they have to say it's like a foe from the universe of Sonic, but you could just say from the universe of Sonic or something like that on the side instead of having to be like, oh, this character in shadow of Sonic.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Well, ends up really feeling like they did Tails dirty.
Yeah, it undercuts him.
Yeah, which Tails deserves a lot more.
Yeah, so we're starting off here with none of these have backup stories. They're all just individual, I think. So we start off with Southern Crossover, Part 1. And the entire series is written by Michael Gallagher and drawn by Dave Monick. So that brings to all the stereotypes of those two creators that you would come to expect.
Yeah.
Still frustrated at being treated like a helpless kid, Tails sets out for Robotnik's southern satellite in Down Under. Along the way, he is harassed by Octobot and new seditious subordinate Crocbot, and aided by the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters.
Yeah. We'll get there when we get there, but the way those Freedom Fighters are introduced is just hilarious. They're literally just like, it's the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters. So
they're introduced like a superhero team. Like we should know who they are already.
That's like the central theme of the early comics, is the writers not understanding that they aren't superheroes.
So they do seem to be somewhat aware of that, though, because that's like the opening gag. I mean, you get Tails for like one page, like writing.
Yes, he writes a comic about himself.
Yeah, but then he writes a comic about himself, which I like how they do the art style differently on purpose, which a lot of the time they don't do that on purpose. But here it's intentional to signify that it's just Tails' comic.
Yeah. But this is about Tails going to Down Under, which is literally the name of it. It's not just like Down Under. They've changed Australia's name. Anyway, so the main the just plot of this issue is just Tails trying to set out, because he immediately runs into trouble with Robotnik with a big ass blimp, but then also gets harassed by Octobot at the same time.
So there's this really strange moment where Robotnik's blimp is being loaded up, and the Swapod is like, all right, let's check the supplies, like you said. And then Robotnik's like, no, it's fine. He sounds like unsure, and I don't understand. And then he's like, now I'm like Darth Vader. I think he actually literally says that. And I'm going to kill you for pestering me or whatever.
Yeah, he does say, as my old friend Darth would say, I find your lack of faith disturbing. I'm looking at my notes here and I'm thinking, did I phone this shit in? Because most of this just says, oh, this is pretty standard Gallagher, Monica, and slapstick. The 40 Fathom Freedom Fighters suck. This is supposed to be a series about Tails, but it's all being handled by some fish, dolphins, and whales. And then that's all my notes. It's like I take way more detailed ones for every other comic. Was I
I
just in
mean,
a bad mood?
and well, I think that's a fair take. It really does feel like Tails is just there to have some connection to the rest of the Freedom Fighters or the rest of the comics. Tails barely does anything other than to represent us because he's learning about stuff that we're learning as well.
Yeah, I suppose.
So it really comes off as they just wanted to show off the Down Under Freedom Fighters, and Tails was their best way of doing it because they wanted to find some way to
No, I get what you're saying.
Tails go off on his own for some reason.
It's the same trait as Penders has, where he takes a Sonic character and uses them as a vehicle to
For his
shove out
own
his new
fan
characters in.
fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
just
yeah,
like
that's
Penders,
basically it.
and just like Penders, they're not especially good characters. The 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters are the worst just because they're not Sonic characters. They're just fish.
Yeah, so is every animal sentient?
I
Or
don't
is it
believe so. But
okay?
the line is there is no line. It's just
It's
whichever
there.
ones they feel like.
Right, whatever the writers decided for that week.
Yeah, it's a bit sloppy is the conclusion
It,
here, I think.
yeah, it's frustrating because the writers clearly don't care. So why should we care?
I think if they cared about anything, it was about our new sub-villain Crockpot, which sounds like they'd make a joke about like a crockpot, like he'd always be cooking something, but no, it's just because they have crocodiles in Australia.
I mean, he looks cool, but
I don't mind.
he's an
I think
he's an underwhelming villain.
yeah, I mean he has a plan to take over Robotnik's army, but I'm not sure why.
It's very strange. This is a topic that will run across the series, I think, but I never quite understand what it is that makes a Badnik want to betray Robotnik. Seems inconsistent. But yeah, for some reason, Crockpot decides, yeah, I'm going to take over everything. And spoilers, it doesn't really add up to anything. It's kind of just there. It doesn't have any meaning, at least in this miniseries.
Oh.
I don't even remember what you're referencing, so I guess we'll see.
But yeah, he's fine. He's just a villain to beat, but he's nothing much to him.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with him.
I guess the difficult thing is like, normally we summarize these issues as we're reading through them, but it's like it's pretty simple what happens. It's just Tails screws up and then he meets some fish and they send him to his next location.
Yeah, Tails, I thought about it a little bit. The problem is that it's Tails. You can structure stories like this. I've seen this where there's like, some adventure that's way in over their head, and they kind of just bumble around from location to location, and it's just a means to string a bunch of disconnected adventures together, right? But that's not really what Tails is about, in my opinion.
Yeah, that doesn't really come off as something Tails would be doing.
Well, and importantly, he is just not. I don't think it's not a character trait that he has. He's not even I wouldn't call him a particularly character-driven individual.
He can be character driven, but this is not Tails' character, or at least not the way that we view him, or most people view him. To be fair, though, the comics have done a very poor job of giving Tails any characterization beyond "I am baby, please protect me."
Yeah,
and then complaining when they protect him.
That's the thing, is that this is a character-driven story in that he is leaving because of something about his character, but it doesn't feel like it once he actually leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes out to like, prove himself and stop Robotnik, but he doesn't seem to. I mean, I guess it makes sense given that situation. If you're just beat up so badly, you'll accept the help and be grateful, but he doesn't seem too bothered that he doesn't get in on most of the action.
Yeah.
Which it's funny, Tails isn't bothered because he's so dramatic at the start, because like Sally comes over and is like, "Oh, hey, Tails, bet you're having fun." He's like, "Yeah, so much fun." He's like, "Those fools! I'll show them all," like some sort of villain.
It's like that fruit he ate earlier on in the series is still affecting him.
I forgot about that, but yeah, it is like that.
Except it's not making him smart, it's just making him a condescending prick.
My last note on this is that there's one member of the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters they save for the end, and they build it up like it's something super amazing, and it's just a big old blue whale that I don't care a single thing about.
It's because he's large and we can draw a 2-page spread of him, so that makes him that
hell
automatically
yeah.
makes him cool.
So I feel like my problem with the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters, which I hate that name because my dumb word slurring brain keeps wanting to just combine all those into weird noises. I think my problem with them is that all the other Freedom Fighters groups that we have met or we meet in this issue or in this miniseries, they've all been bipedals, and it makes sense that they're sentient and that they're fighting as Robotnik. These are just fucking ocean animals that happen to know how to talk. I'd almost think it would make more sense if they were ocean animals that were also bipedal.
Yeah, we wouldn't actually see something like that until the 2013 reboot Archie, but they should have done that from the start, yeah.
Well, I actually, all of them except for the whale. The whale I think that still makes sense to make the whale, keep the whale a whale. Maybe he doesn't have to be able to talk, but he can still communicate in some way, and make the whale their transport.
Yeah. It's funny that you mention how the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters don't have Sonic-like designs, because I think that that's the primary strength, as you can see on the cover of Tales number 2 here, our Australian friends here totally kind of do look like they could fit in with the series. They look
these are fine. These totally look like they could be in they look like they belong in this Sonic universe, but they also wouldn't look out of place in a Sonic game.
Yeah. Anyway, the rest of this issue, or the actual issue, is Southern Crossover Part 2. Finally arriving in Down Under, Tails is attacked and severely injured by flying mechanical dingoes. He's saved by the Down Under Freedom Fighters, who take it upon themselves to retaliate against Crocbot. However, they run into trouble while Tails meets with a mysterious shaman.
Mysterious.
So I hate that the first issue, Tails almost dies and he gets rescued by Freedom Fighters. In the second issue, Tails almost dies and he gets rescued by a bunch of Freedom Fighters.
Mm-hmm. I don't think the next issue does that, but it feels really... It feels like lazy writing that the first 2 issues basically start the exact same way.
Well, and it's robbing Tails of a bit of his agency, which he didn't have a lot to begin with, so it's like,
Well, and that originally seemed like the whole point of this miniseries was that it was supposed to be giving Tails more agency, and all it's doing is just being like is shoving the point home that Tails needs rescuing all the time because he is a child.
It's like if Sonic Adventure you get to the end of Tails' story and you have to defuse the missile, and then some other guy shows up and does it for you. Like they watch you watch him fight the Egg Walker.
Oh my gosh.
Tails just stands on one of the buildings complaining.
And the guy is just like a fish in a business suit.
It's a fucking carp in a 3-piece tuxedo.
That would be great, though. It realistically, it would just be a fish.
Yeah. That said, it's like, it's not like I blame Tails for any of this, because when he gets beat up by the robot dingoes, it's like, this is the thing that I've said about Dave Modic, is that he knows how to draw a person who looks like they got fucked up by something. Like, Tails is in bad shape.
As I said before, given his situation, it kind of makes sense that he'd be like, yeah, thanks for the help, guys. But it's a little weird that at the end, he's like, he seems satisfied with the whole experience somehow, for some reason.
Yeah, satisfied with basically doing nothing.
I guess as long as it's not specifically the friends that he lives by doing everything for him, then it's okay. As for these Australian freedom fighters, not a lot to say about them other than... No, there's not much to say about them. They don't really have, distinct personalities, except for the ostrich guy who's like a hippie.
Yeah. I have to ask, do they show up again?
A little bit. I'm gonna say not that much.
Okay.
This is the thing. When you introduce a big old group of characters, you can do that, that's fine. But you then
Sure.
have to take the time to, flesh them out, show what they're about, actually build them as characters. But this whole series just loves to introduce a whole bunch of characters and then make them go away after like a story, and then so there's not much to them.
Yeah, no, I think it's again just a vehicle for Michael Gallagher to write puns and jokes about how the ostrich guy is a pacifist, which is so stupid because they're robots.
They're robots.
Because like Gandhi or like Martin Luther King or whatever, was like civil disobedience, right? You're doing this,
Right.
but you're not actually fighting. I don't think either of them would have a problem with breaking a robot that would kill them.
See, that's the thing, is people don't understand. It's not. I mean, true pacifism would I guess, be no violence at all. But
Yeah.
usually there's some line where you would draw. Although I will say, with robots, I think you're oversimplifying things a little bit, as there are many examples of these badniks going against what Robotnik says, implying that, I mean, they're robots, but it's the sort of cartoony. They have some sort of awareness.
Some of them are
to a degree.
But it's not like any of the characters in the series really acknowledge it that way. They don't they don't treat them as people, and I don't think the audience is meant to treat them as people, because if you did, it would be kind of psychotic.
Sure.
Anyway,
I do like, for instance, though, here's an example. The dingo, the dog, the flying dog robots. They're drawn pretty menacing much of the time, but there's this one frame where they report back to Crocbot, and they just are given these adorable puppy dog eyes. It's amazing. And they're like, oh, we got beat up.
Dad, please help. Which is, he's an abusive father, because he immediately smacks them after that, but
Like father, like son, if you will, much like Robotnik.
I suppose so.
Another thing, much like Robotnik, is the Down Under Freedom Fighters at one point make a side comment about, oh, look, it's a Crocbot-style fortress, which implies that Crocbot also has ridiculous decoration, just like Robotnik.
Which means that he's just building copies of the Sydney Opera House at different points on the continent.
So I have to wonder, is that the original Opera House, or is that a replica?
I think we're thinking about it more than Michael Gallagher did.
Well, that's what we do best.
The Opera House was reinvented many, many years later, similar to thermoses.
Right, of course. Similar to thermoses and hang gliders.
Yeah. So, weird issue, kind of... It's I'm trying to figure out what... There's a lot of fluff, is what it is, right?
There's been a lot of filler.
There's a lot of fighting that doesn't really go anywhere. There's a lot of planning that doesn't really amount to much. It's, and again, it's just a vehicle for all these silly gags, but when they're not always that funny, it's like, it doesn't feel that good to read. Well, and it's like, I'm about to say, here's a thing that I think is interesting that comes back later and is important, but even this is kind of qualifies, is that Tails, wakes up sort of in this cave pit area, and inside are the Ancient Walkers from the Sonic Triple special.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, what are these guys? They don't say anything because it's the end of the issue, but then we end up meeting with an old, wrinkly echidna shaman whose name is Athair.
Hey, I've heard that name before.
And he looks nothing like he does in Sonic Underground. I know we talked about that before, but he looks completely different. I actually do kind of like his design. He looks more distinct from Knuckles than most of the Penders echidnas do.
Yeah.
Well, and we get a little bit more of him in Tails the Third One, which this cover is rad, and I wish that the stuff in it actually happened in the story.
So I can't help but bring up this fact. He was on some of the other covers too, but Crocbot looks completely different on these covers. It's kind of jarring.
Oof, yeah. I didn't notice that.
Maybe it's just that, there was a script, that said, oh, Crocbot is in this, and He is a buff crocodile man robot. And just from that description, like, Spazion decided, okay, that's what this would look like, even though Monarch decided a completely different look for it. I don't know. But the summary for this issue is, Aether gives Tails a long lesson on the history of echidnas and Chaos Emeralds, and informs him that he may be a chosen one of the Ancient Walkers. Tails returns to the battlefield to take down Crocbot once and for all, and finally learns that the Freedom Fighters were treating him as a kid because he is a kid and needs to be protected. Because that's a fun message.
Yeah.
I like that it starts off with Tails being like, "Are you sure, Aether? This comic page book, maybe it should be improved a little bit." He's like, "No, it's fine." And you can interpret that as like he's like, "Stop being stupid. We have important things to talk about." But I like to think that he actually helped him a little bit to try to move him along first. Then he got tired of it.
I like to think that it's a subtle critique of Pender's writing, because we get into this, like, big explanation about how, oh, the Echidnas had a high-tech society, but a meteor was heading for them, so they sprung Angel Island out of the ground. And Gallagher did not create any of that. That's all Pender's shit. And it's like, oh, well, we introduced our first other Echidna, so I'm just imagining Pender's, like, walking through the office saying, hey, yeah, we need to put this in there. This is the thing that we need to do with another Echidna here.
So there was some collaboration between writers then, I suppose, in this? Since we've got some lore in here. That's interesting, actually. You got to give him something for that, because it seems there's a huge lack of that a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and the ironic thing, of course, is that I'm not sure why they really felt the need to do all this, because Aether is not especially relevant to the whole Crocbot in Australia thing, and the Echidna lore is super not relevant to it. It has nothing to do with any of this.
I'll have to give them some credit, but no, I agree. It's completely irrelevant to the story. Tails is just there to get some lore and be pulled away from the action so that the real heroes, the down under freedom fighters, can get a time to shine. Yeah. I do appreciate, at least, they explain why the Ancient Walkers are called Ancient Walkers. That always confused me. Apparently, they're like dinosaurs. I don't know if it's explained more concretely later, but I assume they were made like immortal with the Chaos Emeralds or something.
Yeah, basically. They also have just been standing perfectly still the entire time, enough for Tails to think they're statues until they start moving.
And then when they start moving by grabbing him.
And also pointing the stake at him.
Again, like they did with Knuckles.
When he said they were statues at the end of issue 2, I was like, they not know how to draw statues, so I'm glad that they actually weren't.
Maybe they had really, really good paint jobs.
I mean, I guess, but they don't. But they're not, so it's a null point.
Yeah, so it's Tails is basically just out of the action for most of this mini-series, frankly, but for the start of this issue, and we get to see Crocbot, whose new weapon of choice is the Ram. It's so stupid.
Honestly, I'm glad that he uses something so stupid.
They had the perfect opportunity for a RAM joke with, like, random access memory, and they squandered it. Man, they hold Tails hostage from the plot for a long time, now that I'm looking at it. He basically just shows up to deal the final blow to Crocbot's technology.
So was the idea that this, again, was supposed to be like a pilot for a series if it was popular enough or whatever, similar to the Sally one?
See, yes, because I think that all of the miniseries were, but this doesn't feel like a pilot for a Tails miniseries. It feels like a pilot for a Down Under Freedom Fighters miniseries.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem. It's called a Tails miniseries, but Tails basically has nothing to do with it.
Well, here's the thing. They have all the lore and stuff with Aether, so I think the idea was they were like dropping hints. I think they do actually pick it up later, but just in the Archie comics regularly. It probably would have shown up in the Tails miniseries because he's like prophesied to be important or whatever. So I think that's what they were going for, but you shouldn't do that in your first story arc, probably.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's a theme with Michael Gallagher, because that was our complaint about the original Sonic comics, is that they had all these stories and what-if ideas that were, plots made for a series that was much later in production than what they actually had. But anyway, we finally get interrupted by Barbie Koala literally falling from the sky and into Tails' arms.
Yeah, apparently she just got launched super far, which, like, okay.
But yeah, we finally go back to the action to fight the CD-ROM ram and also blow up the blimp, and they do a reference to the Hindenburg disaster, which is like, oh, that's maybe a little tasteless. I don't know.
Well, remember when there was like, well, yeah, no. I mean,
It's not the
anything
first
for a
or the last
reference.
tasteless reference, I know.
So yeah, Crockpot has a tank that explodes, and it's like nuclear powered, which like I don't pretend to really understand anything about nuclear weaponry, but if it's supposed to be a nuclear explosion, shouldn't that be more destructive? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I should. If that was
I
like
mean,
if that was a reactor containment breach, which what the fuck else would it be? That would be pretty damning.
yeah, I would turn it into Chernobyl, Australia.
Also,
Well,
the cloud is in the shape of a Thayer, so like, is he dead? I know he's not, but is that the idea?
I feel like it's saying he caused it because the cloud kind of looks like it's got a little grin on it.
maybe this is the deep lore is that the nuclear explosion would have been huge, but Aether kept them safe.
There you go, magic.
I commend you for coming up with somewhat logical explanations for this comic's ridiculousness.
Yeah. So Tails says a tearful goodbye with the Down Under Freedom Fighters and sets off with the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters, who have fixed his submarine at least. So glad to see that again. Got almost no use in this series, I might add.
I'd like to also question, why is it such a sad goodbye? Tails saw them for all of like 20 minutes.
Barbie Koala he might have seen for 25.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah,
Out of context, that sentence is a little.
I just mean that she showed up before the
No,
others.
I know. But
So anyway, Tails gets all broken up, and he's like, my friends, I want to see them again. And he's like, I was mad before, but I know now that they did it out of love for me. That's what he says. Which, like, did he not know that before? Why is he suddenly sad about it now?
I guess the end of the day, the only reason this story exists is because Tails decided, I'm gonna be angry and I'm gonna go off and go on an adventure and prove that I'm strong. And then he realized, oh wait, I'm not strong. Well,
So I guess the issue is, I think that it makes sense for Tails to have this character turn, because he is certainly unappreciated by the others and unappreciated by the story in many ways.
mhm.
But I also think that it makes sense to teach, a kid who might be reading this that you shouldn't do things alone. But it also doesn't really feel like it does Tails any justice by having him learn this without having done anything like a serious achievement throughout this story, because Tails mostly doesn't do anything in this. His claim to fame here is mostly just getting other people to do stuff.
They just already are going to do the things.
Yeah. So, a confused miniseries, I would say.
In my opinion, the two-part Fiona story honestly did a better job of showing Tails going on his own, because you had him be angry, go out and like sort of initially be like, oh shoot, like I can't handle this, but then it does the right thing, which is that he pulls through in the end, but not without costs. It's like he's like, okay, this isn't all fun and games sort of a thing.
Yeah,
and so I think overall it's much better.
That's really what it should have been, is that it
Tails
shouldn't have just been, whether or not to rely on others, but it should have been about maturity, because it's not about maturity, even though it has the shape of a story that would be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and all of this, of course, told with Dave Zmonek's kind of messy art style, which, I every time I see a story that looks like this, I wonder, if this had rad Spaziant art the whole way through, would I think it's a masterpiece? And I don't think that's true in this case, but it's like, I don't know, I just wish that they stopped having every story be Monik or Mulwinny.
Yeah, good art doesn't automatically make something good.
But it can lessen the blow of something that's not very fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was a bit of a dud.
Yeah.
For sure.
But then we are moving on to Sonic number 30, which, I say, oh, stop having Mulwinny and Monik draw everything. This one has a cover drawn by Mulwinny, and I actually think this cover's rad.
It's got a good cover, yeah.
This cover is great. It does set the stage and make it seem like this is going one way when it really doesn't, though, in my opinion. But that's nothing new for covers.
I just think it has a sad AM-ish feel to the whole thing.
It does, yeah.
Oh no, 100%.
The story sort of does too, because it's The Return of Uncle Chuck, which is a good title to hear. Written by Cesare, drawn by Mawini. When Robotnik accidentally teleports himself to the Void, which, I want to be clear, this is a different Void than the Void that they will now be calling the Zone of Silence. This is just a different place.
Okay.
His machine inadvertently restores the roboticized Uncle Chuck's free will. However, Nicole predicts that Snively will destroy the world when overusing the Void device, and Sonic, Chuck, and the other freedom fighters scramble to get things back to normal.
It's interesting since issue number 22, with the whole Eve incident, that Snively has gained some confidence. Perhaps that incident made him rethink things a little bit, because he seems to much more take in his stride Robotnik getting yoinked away this time.
Yeah. We start off with Sonic having, a dream. He says he's dreaming about Uncle Chuck, but it mostly just seems like he was dreaming about food.
I mean, Sonic tends to dream about food a lot in the first place.
I mean, no shade. I'm the same way, but...
So I think he's started to associate those dreams less with the food, more with what else is there with the food.
Yeah. They have this minute, because they go to Robotnik's thing where he's, going to test the Void device or whatever, and I don't like this dialogue from Robotnik, because he refers to Chuck as the unit who was once Sonic's uncle, but it's like, he knows Uncle Chuck. He should be, he tends to call people by their proper titles unless they're Sonic, so he should be calling him Sir Charles, That's what he said in Sad AM.
Something about that aspect of Robotnik's character where he always gives everyone that proper title. I love that. That's a great thing. It's like it shows an understanding of the world, and just that, he's like, but regardless of your titles, I will take my place, sort of a thing.
Yeah. So my question is how a teleportation experiment gives Chuck his memory back?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that it's not bad. It's just very underwhelming of a Chuck story, in my opinion. Much less cool to have him just get his free will back by, a mishap rather than sheer determination.
Right.
And he just kind of shows up is the thing. He just immediately leaves and is like, "Hey, Sonic."
I mean, he just got his memories back. What else would he do?
I just mean, I think that they could have gone for something more grandiose. You could spread it out over multiple panels and focus on characters' reactions before you finally show him and have him say a dramatic line or something. I don't know. These stories, it doesn't feel like they have a lot of pages to work with, so that might be part of it.
The thing is, Chuck's actions in this story are almost all behind the scenes, which I guess if you think about it, that is kind of fitting.
Yeah.
But he's not a spy yet, so I don't know. But yeah, Snively, on purpose, which is, I love this. He purposefully, instead of just leaving Robotnik to rot in the void, he keeps the communication on. He's like, hey, look at my plan. Look at what I'm gonna do. Isn't this great? Just to lord it over him. It's great.
And Robotnik even calls Snively out and pointing out that his plan is dangerous.
Which you'd think that after all that, it would, make Robotnik just be like, all right, time to kill this guy. Maybe it's, part of Robotnik's is that he deliberately doesn't take the right action because it's more interesting that way, but still.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's very much like, Adventures or Underground, in that no, you can't progress major elements. No. Snively has to stay there, which, I mean, I appreciate that because it gets to be awesome later, but there's no consequences other than Robotnik's just like, I'll keep you here so that you can be miserable with me or whatever, which I kind of understand that, but he should be given miserable duties, sort of a thing.
Yeah, you have to clean the toilets.
I'll keep a close eye, but I'm pretty sure he still gets to be in charge of a lot of important stuff.
Yeah, it's not a shift in the status quo. But yeah, so they have this big, sort of dogfight between the spy cruiser and Snively's void plane thing, where Sonic gets trapped in as well.
But he doesn't get much of a chance because apparently Chuck decided the best course of action was to free Robotnik from the void and then throw him on top of Snively.
Yeah, just give him back.
I don't understand how that's a smart plan, honestly.
I think it's just a stupid fat gag.
I suppose.
Like, I understand that you can't get rid of Robotnik at this point. Not when he's gotten very unceremoniously at the beginning. Like, it would be unsatisfying, but like, I can do better than just he was just brought back just because.
It's like, this is a story that I appreciate because I think that it features Chuck being cool and, importantly, has him stay there at the end. He does not get re-memoryfied, but the actual, like, execution of it is a bit lacking.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny, I said before, like, oh, this story doesn't have enough pages to breathe. There's 4 pages of bullshit at the end here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, what was this all about?
We have this 4-page backup story called Who Keeps Stealing My Chaos Emeralds that is drawn by Spaziant, despite having no relevance, which you want to save him for the most important stuff, and written by Paul Castaglia, who I don't think has written anything and barely writes anything else after this. And it's literally just Bunny and Sally keep stealing Robotnik's Chaos Emeralds for jewelry.
So let me just say that, like, it's a joke story, but I don't care one bit. You can't simply use Chaos Emeralds as casual jewelry. This series usually treats the Chaos Emeralds fairly seriously.
Yeah.
But now, not in this story. No.
It's like they don't even look like Chaos Emeralds. They're teeny tiny. They go on rings on Bunny's fingers.
I mean,
that obviously they didn't understand what the Chaos Emeralds were at all.
Yeah, we've established that the Chaos Emeralds are not very well established.
No, I know that, but you could have made this anything. They don't even use the Chaos Emeralds for anything. They just are like, oh, they're pretty.
Yep.
You know, you could have justified this with exactly one thing, and that's releasing it in 2002, so the person who's stealing them for jewelry is Rouge the Bat. That much I think would work.
I totally could see Rouge use Chaos Emeralds as jewelry. That would be awesome and very fitting. Yeah, but not
instead
not
it's
Sally and Bunny. They would realize that they can be used for more than that.
Yeah. Really, it's just weird because this is a Coconut story more than anything. If it's anybody's story, it's his. And it's like, I forgot this guy was even in the comics.
Right, yes. Coconuts. I liked seeing him earlier on because it reminded me of Adventures, but I think that glimpse was probably enough.
I'm really very distracted throughout this whole story because they keep miscoloring his teeth. They keep coloring them red.
He's got blood teeth.
Yeah, huh. Well...
Yeah, so I have no idea what to make of this. Weird issue. We keep saying weird. Maybe I'm saying weird when I just don't want to call something outright bad. I guess I like this better than the Tales stories just because Uncle Chuck is here, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the main story is that weird. It's just imperfect, which is to be expected at this point.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, I didn't expect to be saying this, but I think the real meat of tonight's episode ends up being the Knuckles Chaotix special.
Well, it's not that surprising, I don't think.
I just didn't remember much of it, so I assumed it wasn't that important. You know, and it's funny, they do on this this cover here, they do recreate the title screen of Chaotix, but they finally put Sonic in there.
Right, it's instead of just showing up once, I mean, he still isn't very important at all, but he's at least there, which... Oh, by the way, they got the title right. It says Sonic the Hedgehog presents Knuckles' Chaotix. You could have said Sonic the Hedgehog presents Tails the Fox.
Yeah, okay.
So the main story for this special is The Chaos Effect, written by Penders and I think Kandrovich, and drawn by Mawini, and that's okay in a story where the art goes to the edge of the page and they let him sort of flex his skills a little bit. It's better, I think. An amusement park suddenly springs up on Angel Island, and the freedom fighters investigate. The organizer turns out to be in cahoots with Robotnik, and traps everyone except Knuckles inside a hall of mirrors. It's up to Knuckles and his new team, the Chaotix, to save everyone.
Yeah, so right off the bat, this is gearing up to actually be a much more faithful adaptation compared to some of the other ones, with the whole amusement park.
Yeah, I mean, it's on Angel Island instead of an unrelated place, but yeah.
Well, I never really much understood what the heck was going on in Chaotix, but I understood there was an amusement park, so I don't really care about the change of location.
Well, and they thought better than to name this place Neutrogic High Zone, like in the game.
Oh my gosh.
Chaotix is a weird enough game that there's a lot of ways you could adapt it. The thing that gets me is that, A, we have so many people here on Angel Island. What? And B, it says that, like, oh, tourism is frowned upon by the natives, and it's like, you don't really need to say that because it floats in the sky, guys.
Well, and the natives is like, what, one dude?
So, you say that, and you would be right, but in these comics, I usually, the first time they break something that I'm like, that doesn't seem right, I'll talk about it. But if it's clear that they've just picked a different direction, I'll accept it. Their version of Angel Island, the floating island, is very obviously not uninhabited. They're going for like, no, it's full of people, like because they've
guess.
already shown, like, you know, the dingoes and
Oh, that's right, the dingoes
Vector
exist.
Vector showed up before, of course, actually.
Well, they didn't make it very clear.
No, Vector does live there.
And
and of course, Cat Weasel the Cockatoo. We can't
yes.
forget him.
So it's not supposed to be that. That's what
Yeah.
they're going for. In
I
the
guess it's
comics.
just a case of how did you get here? But I actually do like this opening spread of everybody at the amusement park because it lets them draw in characters from other stories who just happen to be here. You see the backup fighters, you see Jeffrey, you see Amy.
It's a lot like the 25th special page.
Yeah.
Where they just kind of have a whole bunch of different characters, and I always love that. That scenes like that are awesome.
Yeah. But the amusement park is run by this guy whose name is Renfield T. Rodent, which I have to imagine is like a Chuck E. Cheese joke, maybe?
I don't know, he's just a dirty rat or whatever.
Maybe. But, yeah, they go in the Hall of Mirrors, and it's funny because, like, Sonic and Knuckles are, like, still talking shit about each other, but he's going with them anyway.
Knuckles doesn't have any friends to go with.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that I imagine they're, like, you know, the kind of friends who just constantly bicker.
Right.
No,
So you mean,
that's totally it.
You mean the best friends?
Yeah, I mean you and me in high school.
Yeah, pretty much.
But
which
yeah,
I vastly prefer that portrayal of friction between the two rather than, all right, time to beat you up again for no reason.
Yeah, is this the first time that Sonic and Knuckles have been around each other without fighting?
Crazy.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So they go in the Hall of Mirrors and they get trapped inside the mirrors with this big flash of light, except for some reason it traps all the freedom fighters in the mirrors, but Knuckles just gets like a haircut and I guess a hand cut because it takes the spikes off his gloves.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
His natural abilities have been drained, as Robotnik puts it.
Yeah, so it means that his hair is clipped so he can't glide, and his gloves are clipped so he can still punch, just not as well.
Yeah, the idea is like Robotnik is like, all right, I'll leave a witness to tell the tale of how I got everyone or whatever, which is a little strange.
He just kind of walks away.
It's strange to see Robotnik just like, I mean, maybe he's going to do something else, but there isn't really any implication that he's not going to just leave them in the mirrors instead of like roboticizing them. I mean, I guess he probably would have done that at some point.
Well, and mostly they just need to get him away so that he can meet the Chaotix, who just sort of happen at him is the best way to describe their introduction here.
Yeah, so there's multiple pages of all the characters one by one just bursting in, basically.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not totally clear. Like, Vector is clearly someone that Knuckles already knew, but it seems vague the way that Charmy and SBO and Mighty all show up, where they're like, because Mighty just blasts through the wall, which, is that just how he gets around? Does he just punch doors instead of opening them? But Vector
if you could, you would.
Vector responds like, you're one mighty armadillo, so it's like, is that you saying his name, or is that just a coincidence? Because he doesn't introduce himself.
I think it's obviously just, oh, we must cut another pun in.
I think it's deliberately written to obscure whether these characters knew each other or not, so that, like, if they want to decide they've always been friends, they can just put that in later.
You know? Yeah. That's very smart and maybe not even wrong. My guess is that they don't know each other because there's a spread at the end where it's like, oh, I guess we're the Chaotix now, as if they weren't already a group. Or, I mean, they weren't a group, but yeah, I take that as they didn't even know each other, really.
I guess, yeah.
This also is like, okay, so Charmy and SBO and Mighty are all just kind of whatever in terms of characterization. I wouldn't say that they're given an enormous amount of personality, but this is the start of the Vector gimmick, which is where he's always trying to rap and rhyme in his dialogue and enters scenes by saying, yo, what's happening, dude?
Yes.
So that's gonna be really fun to deal with as he becomes a more prominent character.
Oh boy.
This is what your dad thinks rappers talk like. This is an "and I'm here to say" level of rap. Oh, and we also get Heavy and Bomb, but, you know, they're robots. There's only so many things that you can do with them.
I thought you were like you were just making sure to cover the main Chaotix first, but you have nothing to say about them. They actually bring in a bit of a plot hook into this story because the moment it's like there's not much happening. It's just like, oh, I'm bummed out. I guess these people are here. But then Mighty and Bomb are like, hey guys, I'm here. And here's my friend, and we're like rebelling against Robotnik. So hey, let's go get him. In case you forgot that people are in trouble.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think, I don't know, it's just when you have robots in a story, it's either that, some freedom fighter built them, or they rebelled, and I just mean, I don't dislike Heavy and Bomb, there's nothing wrong with them. They look weird, they don't look like they do in Knuckles Chaotix, they draw them wrong, but, I don't know, they feel limited, and maybe that's again the fact that they don't have personalities to speak of, but I suppose I can't begrudge them for that more than the rest of the Chaotix cast. It's just that I know these characters better than these two robots who, even once they're made more correct, are not especially prominent.
I don't know. I just have to give them credit because I don't understand what they were doing in the Chaotix. They were just like, oh, you got unlucky in the character roulette. Now you get these two things that are there. So they actually made them into characters. So yeah, even if they're not especially interesting.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
guess, yeah.
But yeah, all these guys, they're causing trouble. Well, they're not causing trouble yet, but they've got weapons basically that the heroes can use, and so Robotnik decides to preempt this by throwing a new Metal Sonic at them.
Yeah, just suddenly.
So I say it again. Nice that they're actually bringing things from the game, and now we got Metal Sonic, and he's cool. Although the design seems a little like more smooth, not like it's like less jagged. It's more compact. I don't know. It's hard to put into words, but it definitely looks a lot different than he did in the CD adaptation, and I don't really like this design quite as much.
No, because in the CD adaptation, he has the design that he has from the game, just full stop, because Spaziant knows how to draw it. In this, it's like he has more Sonic-like quills, but his eyes are different, and, well, he's still got a mouth. I guess that's different in both, but yeah, I don't love the way he looks, because his eyes, especially, the fact that they're, like, cut off at the top, they're like half circles, it makes it look like he's, like, either got eyelids lowered, like he's making bedroom eyes at people, or like he's just so, like, ugly but angry that it's like, all the time. He has a permanent, like, snarl on his face.
That said, I think it's a pretty entertaining fight as he goes against everyone, and so one by one you get to see each of the Chaotix sort of take him on.
Yeah, and they even use the ring tether from Chaotix.
I like how they use it at first to try to use it as their advantage, but then Metal Sonic just grabs the middle of it like, nah, this thing is just a pain, and I'm going to use it against you.
Yeah, it's as much a liability as it is in the game.
Yeah.
But then he grabs it, and they use it as like they just leverage it to swing him at Mighty, who then punches him through like 4 walls.
Yes.
And it's not like Knuckles is undercut. I'll say this, Knuckles is not undercut by the rest of the Chaotix, because they have Metal Sonic transform into the Titan Metal form from the end of Chaotix, which, hey, thank you guys for integrating a cool thing from the game. But then Knuckles uses the growth power, which is also a thing from Chaotix, and beats the crap out of him.
It's very impressive how many things they actually brought in from the game in this story, as I said before.
It's almost like Pender's played it, or maybe watched somebody else play it.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is I do like seeing, you called him Titan Metal Sonic. I think it's Metal Sonic Kai. I think that's the actual name.
So this is actually a thing that I do need to touch on. Metal Sonic is called Metal Sonic Kai in Chaotix, but it's not whether he's big or not. He's just called that in general.
Okay.
It's just the new Metal Sonic, basically, because that's what Kai means.
Well, they have the big red giant Metal Sonic form in this story, and I like the design. It's cool to see. But Knuckles literally just punches him over and over, and he has no retaliation at all. It's very underwhelming in my opinion.
No, he does not attack once. We wanted to draw a kaiju battle, but we forgot to have the battle part. The kaiju beatdown.
Seriously, really.
But yeah, no, I generally enjoy this story. They have the big fight go down, they save Sonic and company, and then like you said, they do a big pose and it says, "Want to see more of Knuckles in the Chaotix? Write and let us know." And this is the one scenario where I think people probably wrote in enough and they actually did do it, even though they probably wanted to do it anyway.
If you say so.
Maybe. I don't
There's
know.
one character who looks a lot like a Muppet to me that takes away Renfield at the end. I just have to point that out.
Yes.
What animal is that supposed to be?
Muppet.
Just Muppet?
It's a Muppet.
All right then.
Anyway,
find-
so yeah,
oh.
the lead story is all right, and the rest of the stories are Penders writing all of these characters and more Knuckles shit. I am so tired of this.
This is
I'd like
what
to point
you
out-
sign up for every special now.
I'd like to point out that this first one, the first scene with Charmy fucking with Mighty, the scaling is all weird with Charmy.
They have no idea how big Charmy is supposed to be, and it's, you know, like, we're getting into this, and I didn't even do the summary. The only thing is, you know, this second story is just called Tag You're It. It's just them playing tag. It's drawn by Harvo, whose art is still weird, and it's literally just they play tag, and then SBO encounters a mysterious figure, and that's it.
Ooh.
Ooh, spooky.
And yet they somehow managed to spend 5 pages on this. Like, what is this? Why are we doing this like this?
So I can appreciate them wanting to show them just fucking around and being normal, but I feel like they already do that too much with the Freedom Fighters.
Well, so I've got to give them some credit, right? So these characters are a little different because they're from games, but from a reader's perspective, you just met the Chaotix aside from Vector. So I do appreciate they're trying to develop them a little bit here. But I mean, yeah, it's nothing remarkable. It's just messing around. I do like that apparently Mighty has nothing to do at all. That's his character. He's strong and he has nothing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's part of this is also that it's yet more setup for the Knuckles miniseries. This was so long coming. I don't know if this was even part of when they knew there was going to be a Knuckles miniseries, but it's like, it's all... I'm not even talking about this story, I'm talking about the second one, which is called The Hunt Is On, which is written and drawn by Penders, where the Chaotixes are hunted down and abducted by Archimedes, because these might as well be the same story. You could have just had this be a longer, more drawn-out thing with actual stuff happening, except they can't because they're still foreshadowing other stuff, because the whole point is just to have the Chaotix go missing, even though you just introduced them. Ah!
This is like, I could copy paste my complaints from the other 2 instances of Knuckles is confused and we get no answers stories.
Well, it's like,
Same thing.
they get stolen from right out underneath Knuckles' nose, and it's like, we're not going to follow up on this for weeks. It's like, what are we doing here? It's amazing that, like, we can distinguish this much between these stories that are by the same guy, because one of them he's being made to write a complete narrative, and the other he's given free rein, and all he does is foreshadow other stuff that he thinks will be better later, even though there's no hook. There's nothing here.
You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Is there even anything else to do, or are we done here?
Like the panel where SPO is getting kidnapped. His face is funny.
The way all the characters get gotten is kind of amusing. It's just like, oh, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. There's a frame where like Charmy gets like blown up and he just has a silly look on his face. Yeah.
Ugh, Penders, what are you doing to us? Well, with all that said, there's fun to be had here, but it was rough. The main story is all right. The Uncle Chuck story had some good qualities. I didn't hate everything about the Tails stories, but for 5 issues a night, it's... I think we've got better things on the horizon, at least.
I guess that's the reason why we only do these once a week. We don't do these every night. Also, because I don't think we could mentally do them every night.
Yeah. I mean, this is how I'm exasperated after doing this only once a week. And, you know, it's only been like 2 or 3 weeks since the first Penders bullshit thing, so I don't know. You know, maybe I'm playing it up a little, but I think that's gonna be it. Next time on Deep Dive Zone, we are doing Sonic 31, 32, 33, and 34, but in between those, we get Super Sonic versus Hyper Knuckles, which means that, yes, they are going to have another big dumb fight.
I'm assuming since this one's hyped up, there's a reason for the big dumb fight.
Well, we'll get there. I do like at least that they're bringing it to its logical conclusion and just dialing it up to 11.
Is this also our first supersonic?
No,
No.
remember he turned super for no
Universe
reason against
Salamander.
Universe Salamander, yeah.
Oh, right.
I don't
Some of
blame
these
you for
comics,
forgetting.
some
It
of
was
these
pointless.
comics are pretty forgetful.
You know, the comics are not forgetful, actually, because they typically do pay attention to their own continuity. But
Excuse me. They're forgettable.
And on that forgettable note, I think we're gonna sign off. Feel free, if you want, to share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or death threats, you can always reach us at deepdivezonepod@gmail.com or at deepdivezone on Twitter. Have a great night, and hopefully next week will be better than this.
Please no death threats.
No, it's alright, you can send them to me.